Hello everyone, this is Mike from TCAT's Deep Vinyl Tracks, and thought I would come on and do a video today showing some secondhand store finds that I've found in the last couple of weeks. This is an interesting bunch of records that I found, nothing that I was particularly looking for, but things that at the same time when I seen them I thought it was kind of cool and different to have. So anyway, we'll to that in just a minute. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about something I've added to my channel. You may want to go check these out, especially if you've been following my progressive artists that you may not have heard of series that I've been doing. That series I've been doing over the last couple of months, and I'll be doing the last part of that here probably within the next week. So watch out for that. But what does that have to do with the playlist that I'm talking about? Well, right now I've got 4 playlists um, listed, and one of them is progressive artists that you probably haven't heard. Now, that particular playlist I'm putting together to kind of coincide with that series that I'm doing so that you can easily go in. Um, and I tried to list a couple of tracks, 1 or 2 tracks from each artist, and you can go in there and listen to any of those that I've mentioned or that you might be interested in. I don't have them all on there yet. That is a work in progress, as all the playlists are works in progress right now. And I'll be adding more to those playlists, so it's good to go in and check them out all the time. I try to keep it to artists that may not be quite as well known as others. I mean, I'm not going to put the obvious ones up there like Kansas or Yes or some of those, but I'm going to be putting up artists that people are not quite so familiar with. Uh, on top of that, there are 3 other playlists that I've got there. One is an eclectic playlist. This is this one contains music that's sort of experimental, music that takes its inspiration from several different genres and things like that. There's also an alternative list. This one lists different artists from all the way from the 80s up to present day that can't be considered, basic classic rock and roll or anything like that, but they're more uh, artists that are a little more uh, off on doing their own independent thing. You know, taking the regular rock formula and uh, adding a different sound to it, and you'll see bands on there like oh Gomez, um, different ones like that. I can't think of what they are right off the top of my head now, and I want to keep the flow moving on this video. So that's the alternative list, and then there's also an indie folk alternative country list that I'm putting on there. Again, these are mostly bands that I've mentioned in past videos, like the Jones Sisters. Um, that's one, for example. Um, Others like that that people haven't quite heard so much about. The Low Anthem, I've got a couple of songs on there by them. So anyway, these are all open to the public, and everybody's welcome to go in and check these out. Um, if I mention a band that you may not have heard of, you want to hear a little bit more of, then go in and see if they're on that list. All right, and I'll be adding some other lists too, so watch for those. So let's get into the records that I found. First of all, uh, these, like I said, these are all records. They were $2.99 a piece. I think I ended up getting them for $1 a piece at the register by the time all the discounts and everything had taken effect. So and they're not albums I was necessarily looking for, but I thought were great deals and pretty interesting things I wanted to listen to. So, first of all, I got this twofer from Frank Sinatra. Um, this one has two Frank Sinatra compilations, actually. These were compilations that were put out in 1967, and here it combines the both of them that were put out that year. First of all, you got Try a Little Tenderness, and then there's this one, which is Nevertheless, I'm in Love with You. So the songs on these are mostly standards, covers that he's done, and it's kind of nice to have both albums on one single album. And there are two different records here, both on the Capitol label. So there's that one. But you know, I like finding stuff by Windham Hill on the Windham Hill label, especially samplers. This is Windham Hill Records piano sampler, and this has 9 different artists, piano soloists on it. Originally put out by Windham Hill in order to give some new artists some attention. Of course, everybody knows George Winston. He is not on this collection because this collection was to try to get some of their lesser known people some exposure. Inside there's a sheet that tells you about each one of the artists, and of course it comes in the regular Windham Hill sleeve, plastic sleeve, with the typical Windham Hill labels on it. Now these were all in fairly good shape. A couple of them need to be cleaned up a bit. A couple of them did not have inner sleeves, so I mean, when you're finding stuff at a secondhand store for $1, you're willing to spend that money on things that you probably normally wouldn't be looking for. That particular sampler, by the way, was put out in 1985. Next I found this record by Gary Burton and Chick Corea. This is called Crystal Silence. Crystal Silence was put out in 1973. Gary Burton and Chick Corea both did collaborations a couple of other times throughout their careers, and they actually did a second volume to this around 2004, if I remember right, something like that. Anyway, Chick Corea, of course, plays piano. A lot of people are familiar with him. And Gary Burton on vibes. And there are no other musicians involved on this record at all. It's just piano and vibes. And you'd actually be surprised the different sounds and textures you get from this album. It's actually quite well done. It's on the ECM label. And this one did not have the inner sleeve, but the record itself, except for a small scratch on the second side, is in good shape. This is great mellow jazz. Even at times gets a little bit ambient, but can also be surprisingly upbeat. And quite honestly, listening to it, you don't really miss you don't miss the regular percussive instruments, you don't miss the bass, any of that. Just piano and vibes, and makes for quite a beautiful record. The Charlie Bird Trio. This is Bird at the Cafe, or Bird at the Gate, sorry. This is Charlie Bird and his trio and a couple of guests performing at the Village Gate. recorded live. You got Charlie Bird, of course, on guitar, Keith Betts on bass, Bill Reckenbach on drums, Clark Terry on trumpet, and Selden Powell on tenor sax. This was recorded May 9th and 10th of 1963 and was actually released in 1963 also. I've listened to this one. This record, well, first of all, you notice it's still in the shrink. It was unsealed, which is fine, but the record is as clean as can be, just like brand new. I only noticed a little static right at the very end of side one, but hardly enough to even mention. Um, uh, this record is on Riverside label. As you can see, it's just like brand new, and it sounds that way too. Beautiful sound, very quiet, and the actual music on this is quite well done. You've got a couple of covers on here. More, the theme from Mondo Cane, and I Left My Heart in San Francisco. But there's also some originals on here. There's a traditional arrangement by Bird, Where Are the Hebrew Children, which is a definite highlight on this record. And the 7-Minute Blues for Night People, which is one of Charlie Bird's compositions. Plus you've got a couple of other tracks that feature the other guests. All in all, this is a surprisingly excellent record. Most people know that this Charlie Bird, the guitarist, was famous for bossa nova, making, that was his big thing back in the day. This one has a couple of bossa nova tracks, but has quite a variety, a surprising amount of variety on it. Charlie Bird's guitar is just quite amazing on this. You can hear how good he is, especially in concert. Just a great album. I'm really happy to get that one. Another jazz record. This is a compilation called The Music Guide, Volume 1. This was released in 1982, and it says it's a guided musical tour through the first album release on Elektra Musician Records. Limited edition, special low price. You've got some really great artists on this: Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea, Lenny White, Chaka Khan sings as a guest on one of the tracks. Eric Gale, the Griffith Park Collection, Joe Henderson, Freddie Hubbard, John McLaughlin, Charlie Parker, Lee Ritenour, Red Rodney, and Ira Sullivan. Here's what the back of it looks like. This is not tape, this is actually a gold label promo stamp. And there you go. There's the track listing. I don't know how well you can see that. But like I said, Chaka Khan guests on one of the tracks. Got some other great artists and some great tracks on this. I haven't listened to it yet, but it looks like it will be really good. Here's what the label looks like. Elektra Musician. So a nice compilation. I love jazz compilations. This one was a cool find, actually. It's actually a soundtrack by Keith Emerson, and this is something you don't see very often, so it was a nice find. I don't see Keith Emerson's solo stuff or soundtracks very often. This was released back in 1981. I think that's also when the movie was released, and it starred Sylvester Stallone, Billy D. Williams, Lindsay Wagner, and Rutger Hauer. Let's That's what the back of it looks like. Now this one has a little bit of water damage on the bottom, nothing major. Um, it does have the inner sleeve, but the inner sleeve's kind of trashed. But it's also mastered at half speed. There you can see the inner sleeve. Looks pretty gnarly. And you've got Keith Emerson plays with some musicians, and also the trying to find the name of the orchestra, l'Orchestre de l'Opéra de Paris. I don't know how to pronounce that, but anyway, this is on Backstreet Records. This is mostly instrumental. However, it does have one track with a guest singing. I'm trying to find her name. Sorry. Paulette McWilliams. And there's a second track with vocals on it by Keith Emerson. And that's actually a cover of the song I'm a Man by Steve Winwood. Now I've listened to this record. Again, it plays quite well. It's very quiet. Needs a little bit of a cleaning, but it's still played really well. Interesting thing about this is it does sound, especially the first part, it sounds a lot like Keith Emerson. You can tell it's him. You can almost hear Greg Lake singing the lyrics instead of the people that are actually singing the two songs. It's not a bad record. I enjoyed it for the most part. It's something I'll go back to, but I just think it's pretty cool to have one of Keith Emerson's solo albums. Not something I see very often. Okay, this one here. Cowboys International, the Original Sin. This is the only official album this band put together. And, you know, I don't know how many people are familiar with this particular band. I can tell you a few things about them. They are synth pop, and both Keith Levine and Terry Chimes are both original members of the band. Now the band went through a lot of lineup changes after this record was, even while the record was being recorded, so much so that they decided not to even stay together. So this is really the only record they released back in 1979. Now, those of you who are fanatics of The Clash may recognize two of the names, Keith Levine and Terry Chimes. They're both founding members of The Clash. Terry Chimes was the drummer. Also, Keith Levine was helped out with Public Image Limited. So they got together, put this record together. Here's the back of it. There's the names of the people in the band. Now, Keith Levine ended up leaving the band somewhere while they were recording this record and only actually shows up on one track. Terry Chimes, however, stayed with the band pretty much as long as they were together. And there were several lineup changes, like I said, major lineup changes throughout their history. However, one of the members, I'm trying to remember, Keith Loki, ended up reforming the band in 2004 and released another record. So I thought that was quite interesting to find out. It's on the Virgin label. One side green, one side is red. And there's supposed to be, I haven't heard the record yet. I don't recognize any of the tracks, but there's supposed to be synth pop, like I said, but have quite a level of experimentalism in their music. That is one reason that the record companies had kind of an issue with them, you know, because they wanted something that wasn't quite so experimental. And, you know, this all led to them not releasing any other albums. Last but not least, it's my last one. This is kind of a cool thing. Again, not a band that I was looking for, but when I seen it, I knew I had to pick it up. Blancmange. This is their first album, and of course they released several albums throughout their history. This is called Happy Families, and actually, yes, they released 14 studio albums throughout their history. But this particular record was released in 1982. The track "Living on the Ceiling" was reached number 7 on the UK singles chart. So they did have a single off of this. This is actually their first album. Like I said, it was the one that made them quite popular in the UK, and they also got a following in the United States. I remember hearing about these guys and actually hearing some of their music back then. Here's the back of the record. This is a Canadian pressing, so it has a slightly different track order from any of the other pressings. There's a special mix of Blind Vision added to this particular record, which isn't on the on any of the other reissues. On any of the other issues, I should say. If you're not familiar with Blancmange, they're an experimental pop band. There's the label. Kind of cool labels. Again, this is pretty clean. There's a few pieces of cardboard, I guess, from the actual record cover on there. But other than that, it's a nice, clean record. So I haven't heard that yet, but I'm excited to listen to it. I know basically what they sound like, so I think it should be a pretty good album. Happy Families. There you go, quite a diverse collection there, but like I said, these were all good finds that I wasn't expecting to find. And you know, anytime I see something like that, I pick it up. You know, you're not out a lot of money when it's only $2 or $3 or even $1, as was the case with these. And so I can't complain. Anyway, there you go. Thank you for watching this video, and we will talk to you later.